Welcome to ESPN Classic's Battle Lines. I'm Rich Eisen. It might have been the most outrageously dramatic home run ever. It was hit in the bottom of the ninth, and it was struck virtually one-handed by a player with two bum legs. Rarely does an entire World Series hinge on the first game, but this one did. When Kirk Gibson made his celebrated fist-pumping, gimpy-legged tour of the bases on a tingling October night in 1988, he took the heart of the Oakland A's with him.
It was a David and Goliath matchup between the Dodgers and the A's in '88, and the conclusion of the first game was just preposterous, implausible.
And look who's coming up.
You have to remember the natural was still in the public's mind at the time. And there was Kirk Gibson, who was so hurt he couldn't play, couldn't run.
You talk about a roll of the dice. This is it.
It took your breath away. We always thought Roy Hobbs was a fictitious character, and this guy was going to prove he was for real.
In the modern era, this may have been the most dramatic single swing in baseball because of all the things around it.
All year long, they look to him to light the fire.
The sign of a great athlete is you got to come through when the pressure's on, and there was no greater pressure than that at that time that I've ever been around, and I've been around a long time.
You knew this was instant American baseball folklore. There was no doubt about it. It was Redford without the lights sprinkling down and onto the field.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
The 1988 Oakland A's towered over baseball. Physically imposing, they cowed other teams.
The A's had won 104 games. They were the overwhelming favorites. They were at the beginning of a run during which they were clearly the best team in baseball.
The A's were the powerhouse. The A's had the people. The A's had a miraculous, wonderful season.
They had a football team. You're looking at Canseco, McGuire, Parker, Baylor. You know, Carney Lansford was a pretty big guy. Dave Henderson.
They were a scary team. And just when they showed up, I think they won a lot of games just because they were the A's.
You know, I see a lot of guys stretching right next to the cage when they come into town or whatever, and they watching these guys hit these bombs. You know, it's like, ooh. So if you're a starting pitcher or something, you don't hang out watching us take BP.
You hear about McGuire and Canseco. What you see on TV is really not a comparison to what you see when they actually see him walk onto the field.
The Bash Brothers was a perfect symbol for what the A's represented. To see these two huge guys, you know, bashing their forearms together, it sort of symbolized what the A's were. This team was all powerful.
I think we averaged between 4 or 5 guys, I think 6'3", 230, 235 pounds, and that was unheard of. And basically, we were the team to beat.
You knew you might make a mistake or two throughout a game. You're going to as a pitcher. And you just hope you can minimize your damage because with Big Mac and Hosey, one of them are going to hit the ball a long way somewhere.
To complement its oak-armed sluggers, Oakland fielded a fearsome pitching staff, spearheaded by its menacing ace Dave Stewart. Every fifth day, Stewart stared down hitters from beneath his cap before blowing them away. 1988 represented Stewart's second year in a string of 4 consecutive 20-win seasons.
The intimidation factor started when we walked out on the field, and then it continued when Dave Stewart grabbed the ball. He had that devilish stare. He'd look down on you and say, "There's no way you're going to beat me."
Dave Stewart will never be in the Hall of Fame because he didn't have a long career at his top. But for that 4 years that he was winning 20 games or more, he was as good as anybody I've seen.
He was big and hard-muscled guy. I mean, I thought he was one of the scariest-looking guys on the mound that I'd ever seen.
You talk about leaders on that team. There was no bigger leader than Dave Stewart. He was a guy that just exuded leadership, confidence. You know, he was just a tremendous presence on that team.
If the A's were the team everyone feared, the 1988 Dodgers were the team nobody knew.
We were picked 4th in our division that year by the, so-called baseball experts.
These were not the Garvey, Say, Lopes, Baker Dodgers that everybody remembered.
In an effort to inject pizzazz and passion into the Dodger blue blood, Los Angeles signed Kirk Gibson as a free agent. 4 years earlier, he won a World Series with Detroit, and Gibson, the one-time star receiver at Michigan State, brought a football mentality to the diamond.
He played football on a baseball diamond because when Kirk hit the ball in the gaps, it was like he was running a pattern because he did it so quickly and aggressively.
He's a rough, hardcore type of kid. If you give him a challenge, he's going to come and take that challenge and run with it.
Tommy fell in love with Kirk Gibson. I mean, he was Tommy's type of player.
He was a competitive guy who was outwardly competitive. There was a ferocity about the way he approached the game. And some people may have thought that the Dodger clubhouse in that era needed that kind of jolt from somebody who not only gave it everything he had, but would get on teammates if they didn't.
I knew when not to go near him. When he had that look on his face, was going to break a batting cage or whatever he was going to do.
When he came into camp, I know the first couple of weeks I tried to play a prank on him.
There was some eye black put on the inside part of his hat by Jesse Orozco, and Kirk went out to do his wind sprints and took his hat off to do that, and everybody started laughing at him in the close confines in Vero Beach.
Gibby, being kind of stone-faced and serious about everything, was wondering what the heck's going on, and when he finally realized it, he stormed off the field, went back in the clubhouse, told Lasorda he's going to have to get somebody else to hit third and play left.
The next day, Tommy says, look, Kirk wants to make a speech here. He wants to talk to you guys. Gibson has the floor. You could hear a leaf blow. And Gibson starts reaming him out again. You know, this is why you're in last place. I'm here to win. I'll be the best teammate you ever had. You know, you're a pitcher. You want to hit a guy, hit him. If there's a fight, run out to left field. I'll kick his ass. But let's get serious.
People have to understand me. We've got a long year here. I'm here to become a world champion. I want them to be able to count on me, but I can't deal with their behavior right now. Your fundamentals are bad. It says we're going to lose again.
And that really set the tone because he's a commanding presence that just overwhelmed the whole team. You know, that's our team leader, period.
Gibson's tenacity won his teammates over and perhaps led them to a pennant. Still, many felt they had no chance to win the 1988 World Series with the mighty A's standing in their way.
I'm not being funny about this, but those two clubs don't belong in the same ballpark.
I didn't want to go to New York. I said, boy, it'd be a lot nicer just to go to L.A. This would be a nice World Series. Just an hour. And you know what else I was thinking, to be honest with you? I was thinking we'll kill the Dodgers.
The 1988 Dodgers warmed themselves over the fire lit by Kirk Gibson in spring training and came together as one of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts units, a close-knit team in every sense.
See, the ninth inning was the moment for our team. When we were losing, everybody was there, and everybody had that feeling that, man, something's going to happen. It's just been happening to us all year.
I got to pinch hit in the bottom of the 11th inning in August against the Giants. Bottom of the 11th, bases loaded, 2 outs, ran to a 3-2 count, got a base hit up the middle, we win the game.
They won a lot of games 2-1, won a lot of games 3-2, and they found ways to win. Kirk Gibson gave them an extraordinary lift by his hustle and his grit and his determination to succeed.
When you're playing the 88 Dodgers, there are no easy victories. You might have beat us, but we were pushing you. And if you had to play us the next day, we're going to be battling you again.
He was on second base. His knees were still good. He was on second base against Montreal at Dodger Stadium. There was a passed ball, and he came from second base on that passed ball, and he scored.
1-2 pitch. Right on through the catcher into the screen. Gibson comes to third. He's going to try to score. The play at the plate. He scores, and the ball game is over.
Others in the game put up gaudier numbers than Gibson. For example, the Mets' Darryl Strawberry had 39 homers and 101 RBI. But clearly, numbers alone belied Gibson's worth. Amidst his mere 25 home runs, sports writers saw enough energy, resolve, grit, and determination to see fit to vote Gibson the most valuable player of the National League.
Should Darryl Strawberry have been the most valuable player that year? Yes, in terms of statistics. No, not in terms of emotion.
To say a guy hit 27 home runs instead of 25 makes him an MVP, or a guy hits 310 instead of 300 makes him a better candidate for an MVP. I don't think that's the case.
People didn't vote on numbers that year. They voted on a feeling. And that feeling was, this man was a human tow truck carrying this team to the World Series.
With Gibson filling the role of enforcer, manager Tommy Lasorda felt free to employ his sly and unsubtle guile.
Tommy probably is at his best with that kind of a club in that he can bring out all of his emotional weapons and motivational weapons.
He always yell, oh, we're the greatest team in the world, we're the best player in the world, you're the best shortstop. You get to a point that, you listen to him and you believe it.
You have to make them believe. You have to let them know what it's going to take for them to be successful. All I say to them is, hey, do you want to win? Do you want to be in the Fall Classic? Yeah. Well, then I'll tell you what it's going to take for us to be there.
I don't think there's any question that that stuff worked, especially that year. And he could motivate his guys, and he could get them to buy into that, so that if they did maybe cut their arm, they'd be stunned if it wasn't Dodger Blue coming out.
I felt like Tommy was my brother. He was my dad. He was everything. I mean, we were in the trench together, and he was the greatest at it.
Lasorda's the guy who's credited with giving Orel the nickname Bulldog, and Orel definitely started to pitch like a bulldog at some point.
Unlike the A's ace, the Dodgers' #1 pitcher had an innocence about him. Slender, quiet, bespectacled, he decorated scoreboards with long strings of zeros. In 1988, Orel Hershiser had a season to die for.
Hershiser's 88 is a pitching season to rank up there with Bob Gibson's 1968, with Walter Johnson's 1913.
He didn't look that overpowering either. He looked a little bit like the kid in the front of the classroom saying yes to the teacher instead of the rowdy in the back who played good baseball.
He was the leadership of that pitching staff, because when a losing streak was there, you knew Orel was going to start you on a winning streak.
He just didn't give hitters a chance. He did not give hitters hittable pitches. So when they were swinging, they were hitting the top of the baseball primarily.
His sinker, it was probably that year the toughest pitch to hit in baseball, because when he let it go, it was in the zone. When you swung at it, it was out of the zone.
He was unhittable in September. That's when the shutout string really started rolling, and every pitch in his repertoire he could put wherever he wanted.
I was pitching well throughout the season, but the end of the season with the streak, and everybody saying that shouldn't happen at the end of the season, that should be when you're tired.
On September 28th, when his tank could have easily run dry, Hershiser reached out and touched one of baseball's untouchable records: the 58 consecutive scoreless innings pitched by Dodger Don Drysdale 20 seasons before.
We're in San Diego playing the Padres, and at that point, Orel had 49 scoreless innings consecutive. So it wasn't probably on anyone's mind that it would happen that night. Well, of course, it goes extra innings, and he pitches 10 innings scoreless and breaks the record.
The 1-2 pitch. Fly ball to right on a semi-check swing. Gonzalez, the record. Orel Hershiser, 59 consecutive innings scoreless.
Drysdale's was a great streak, but Hershiser's was even greater. And it was also greater because of the moment. I mean, he was riding this team to a pennant. It was a team that was down 9 games at the All-Star break in Cincinnati, and they come back and they finish first.
There are times when you get on the horse's back and you're riding, and we rode him right into the postseason.
Now ready in the 3-2 pitch to Marvell Wynn. Swung on a fly ball to right field. Stack backing out and calling. He's got it.
What about the New York Mets, Red? You got to face them now.
Hey, the Mets are a great ball club. On tape, everybody thinks the Mets are going to beat us. They might beat us, but we're going to give them a hell of a goddamn series, I'll tell you that.
Like the Charlie Finley version of the decade before, the 1988 Oakland A's were a team loaded with potential trouble.
The expectation was, can we, all these 10, 15-year, 20-year guys get along? And that was La Russa's job, to get all these all-stars and veterans together on one page.
Tony La Russa came to Oakland only a year before and brought with him the reputation he had established and encouraged while with the Chicago White Sox. Manager as human computer.
Tony La Russa is the un-Lasorda. He's a meticulous planner. And to La Russa, counting on adrenaline is not good planning.
When you sat down with Tony, he would go through some of the moves, and by the time he was done, I mean, he'd reinvented the wheel. It was the atomic bomb here.
I've never seen anybody in my life, regardless of how he knows how to manage the game, just every day, just plugging. I mean, he never stops.
It was a team that gained confidence as the season went on, and to the point where, you know, in the second half, they really thought they were invincible.
The A's established themselves early on, winning 14 straight, led by the appropriately named Bash brothers, Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco.
They sort of jumped into first place and stayed there. I think that people were beginning aware of Jose Canseco because I think on April 21st he stole 3 bases in a game.
I don't think there was any question that Jose Canseco was the stud of studs on that team. There was a lot of competition for that mantle, but he was early in his career and there was just so much potential surrounding him.
Even though Mark had hit 49 home runs as a rookie, which was a record, and a lot of people thought that would be his career year. Jose was the guy with the super talent. Jose was a guy that everybody thought could hit 300 and hit 50 home runs and do all the wonderful things.
He fashioned himself as the 21st century ball player, a guy who almost kind of like the Terminator as a ball player. He took just this incredible swing. I mean, it was so hard. I mean, he put everything into it, and it wasn't a pretty swing. It was a savage swing.
If Canseco hit a home run and that ball went 450 feet, he was going to watch every inch of it. He wasn't just a baseball player. He was almost like a rock star, the way he carried himself and the way the women followed him around and the way people fawned over him.
Earlier in the season, Canseco became the 11th player in history to produce 30 homers and 30 steals, and he kept right on slugging and swiping. As the season wound down, Canseco appeared poised to become the first 40-40 performer ever.
I didn't want to be that type of power hitter that would go base to base. I wanted to be an aggressive type player. And I knew that if an opposing pitcher was going to walk me, I was going to create havoc and steal second and third base.
He's ready. There's the throw. Number 40. Jose Canseco, the first man ever in big league history to do it.
We were like ready to vote him into the Hall of Fame right away. Why wait? But he really had a great season.
Canseco finished batting .307 with 42 homers, 40 steals, 124 RBI, and, like Gibson, an MVP award. Canseco also finished with accusations of steroid use.
At the point in time, I was just a guy who was, 6'4", 235 pounds, who could run a 4.340 and accomplish a 40-40, and people really couldn't understand that. In those days, a guy my size was not supposed to do that.
Boston was an excellent team. Clemens, Hurst, Greenwell, Boggs at the top of his game. They had Lee Smith in the bullpen. But the A's just cruised right through them, and Jose led the way.
In the American League Championship Series, the Red Sox managed to stay close in every game. However, when the 9th inning arrived and the Sox trailed, they were done. That's because the A's had the ultimate closer in Dennis Eckersley. Against the Eck, even Wade Boggs, the 1988 American League batting champion, offered little help.
He struck out Boggs in Game 1 of the playoffs. I think he struck out Boggs twice in that series, and, Wade Boggs did not strike out.
The last at-bat of the game is Boggs against Eckersley, and Boggs swung and missed on the last pitch of the game. And let me tell you, Boggs swung and missed about 30 times the whole season that year.
When I struck out Boggs, that was big, because that set the tone. It was Game 1. And I struck him out on 3 pitches. It was awesome. I painted him, threw one over here. Everything was nice.
Eckersley was like untouchable. He'd come in and he'd retire the side in 11 pitches. I mean, he was one of the greatest, if not the greatest relief pitcher of all time.
Whenever the A's had a 1, 2, or 3 run lead going to the 9th, Eckersley was going to come in and 95 to 98% of the time slam the door.
4 games in succession, Eckersley slammed the door, and the windows, and the gate, and the latch, setting a championship series record for saves. He picked up the series MVP award, and the A's strutted into the World Series.
Back goes Gallego, and the Oakland A's have won the American League pennant.
While the A's cruised into the 1988 World Series, the Dodgers did not. Standing in their way, the veteran Mets, the champs of 2 years before, who won 100 games in 1988, including 10 of 11 against L.A.
We got rained out the 12th game, which we were happy. We just couldn't beat them at all. I mean, everything went wrong every time we played them. So when we played them in the playoffs, they were heavily favored.
The Mets weren't just going to beat the Dodgers, they were going to destroy them. They were going to sweep them in 4 games. A lot of people thought the Dodgers would be 4-0.
The Mets just didn't think they could lose. In '87, there were a lot of injuries that prevented them from winning, and by '88, they figured that they were back on top. It was basically the same nucleus of players.
In Game 4, the Mets and Dwight Gooden were 1 inning away from a 4-2 win and a 3-1 hammerlock on the series. The Dodgers had a runner on first and Mike Scioscia at bat.
I got a great pitch to handle. I put a swing on it, and I got under it a little bit and happened to get the ball airborne.
Scioscia at the plate. Hernandez playing back of the runner at first, and that's ripped to right field and deep. Strawberry goes back. She's gone.
I was, I'm surely the most surprised person in the stadium, and 55,000 New York fans were real quiet at that moment.
The home run, it came out of nowhere. And, you know, to this day, Gooden admits that it still eats at him. That was the turning point of the series.
With the score tied at 4 and the top of the 12th, Kirk Gibson limped to the plate.
Gibson hits a high drive, a towering drive to deep right center field, and that one is gone.
In the bottom of the 12th, the Mets loaded the bases with 2 outs. Kevin McReynolds stepped to the plate. Out in the Dodgers bullpen, a surprise.
Between the time Scioscia hits his home run and Gibson hits his home run, I am lobbying for the ball through Peronowski, and I go down the bullpen and I tell Mark Cressy, the bullpen coach, that Tommy sent me down to warm up. Cressy gets on the phone and said, Bulldog's down here and says you want him to warm up. And Tommy goes, if he's there, warm him up.
Peronowski said to me, Tommy, if you say you're sticking your head into a guillotine, if they tie the game, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? I said, I don't care. I'm putting the whole ball of wax on the Bulldog. Go get him.
Broken bat looper, shallow center field. In comes Shelby and makes the catch.
The Dodgers won Game 5, but the battered Gibson re-injured his knee, stealing second base in the 9th inning. The Mets took Game 6, but that only meant they would have to face Hershiser again.
It seemed like we saw him every day. Every day he was in there pitching. I don't know how he did it. But he single-handedly beat us. He stopped in relief, or when he started, he stopped everything that we had going.
And he looks in now to make what he hopes will be his last pitch. Fastball, got him looking.
Everybody thought the dream was over. You know, great season for the Dodgers, played their hearts out, you know, bye-bye. Now you're playing the Oakland A's.
Everybody wanted to see the New York Mets and the Oakland A's because they were the 2 powerhouses of the American League and the National League, and somehow it seemed like we were interfering.
It stirred us up. Like, here we go again, okay, let's get ready to go. We're going to be in a fight.
The Dodgers started rookie Tim Belcher, while the A's countered with their ace, Dave Stewart, a 21-game winner. But the Dodgers' soul was on ice, literally.
That day, I got up about 5:30 in the morning. I kind of said, yeah, it's okay. I can deal with that. I can deal with that. And then I started jogging across my living room floor, and it grabbed me. I went, oh, my goodness.
Our understanding coming into Game 1 was that Gibson not only would not play, obviously he wasn't in the lineup, but that he was not available for pinch-hitting duties.
Perhaps succumbing to nerves, Belcher hit Jose Canseco in the 1st inning. Stewart retaliated immediately, plunking Steve Sachs on the first pitch in the bottom of the inning.
In the first game, it turned out to be a turning point because then Hatcher hits the home run in the 1st inning.
Fastball hit into left field and deep. Back goes Parker, way back, and it's gone.
When I got to home plate, he was right behind me. He was like, damn, Mickey, slow down, man. He was like sprinting around the bases. I don't know if his feet actually touched the ground.
That was just pure, unadulterated, just happy. Just a 12-year-old kid type happy.
Even with a 2-0 lead, Belcher struggled with his control. He loaded the bases in the second. His outfielders began to retreat uneasily. Canseco, you see, was up.
It was a 1-0 slider, down and away, and he just hit a shot. Yellowstone Park wasn't going to hold that one. I mean, it was a rocket.
And there's a drive to center. Back goes Shelby to the wall. It is gone. Grand slam home run for Jose Canseco.
And look where he hit it. Over the center field fence, a line drive. It didn't get up, it didn't get down, it just got out.
There was a definite sense when Canseco hit his grand slam that, okay, you know, the Dodgers had their little moment. Now we're back to serious business. The A's are going to take control of this thing.
As expected, Oakland's bats did the damage early in Game 1 of the 1988 World Series. But after Jose Canseco's grand slam gave Oakland a 4-2 lead, a ceasefire seemed to settle over the game.
There was a lot of missed opportunities on both sides, really. It just wasn't happening for us. And on the other hand, for the Dodgers, it wasn't happening for them either. So it's kind of like a pitching duel from the, I guess, third inning on in.
The Dodgers managed to cobble together a run in the sixth, but still trailed in the bottom of the ninth, 4-3.
I let off the inning, and I let off popping out, and I come back to the dugout, and I sit down, and Jeff Hamilton's up next, and he makes an out. And then all of a sudden, Mike Davis goes up to pinch hit and ends up drawing a walk.
Dennis Eckersley walked Mike Davis, and it stunned me in center field because I've watched this guy almost get 50 saves through the course of the year. And like they say, he can hit a gnat's ass with a pitch.
I had played with him the year before and seen him, you know, for several years play. And so I knew he had power. I just tried to nip the outside corner too many times. I think that was major mistake at that point.
He walked him seeing Dave Anderson standing on the on-deck circle. He walked him thinking, it's okay, I can get this guy.
Anderson hit only .249 during the season, but he wasn't going to get even one swing. In the Dodgers clubhouse, there was a stirring that no one could believe.
And there is no Gibson, the man who was the spearhead of the Dodger offense throughout the year. Will not see any action tonight for sure.
At one point, he was watching the game on TV. He heard Vin Scully tell millions of viewers, still no Gibson. Gibson will not swing a bat tonight. Gibson heard that, and he said, my ass.
I was there when Gibson was sitting on the training table with 2 ice packs on, did not have his uniform on. Gibby, at that time, tore those things right off. I mean, the ice pack right off, went in and got dressed.
There ain't nobody's more stubborn or more convinced that he can do something than Kirk Gibson.
Bob Costas and I co-hosted the World Series pregame show, and for the postgame interview, we would always flip a coin as to whether I would get the Dodgers or whether I would, get the Athletics. Bob drew the Dodgers.
Well, I'm standing in the corner of the Dodger dugout, waiting to interview Lasorda maybe about what his plans are for Game 2. And standing where I'm standing, near the tunnel leading back into the clubhouse, I can hear Gibson. I can't see him, but I can hear him hitting balls off a tee into a net.
I'm the one who's putting the ball in the tee for him in the tunnel to get him ready because I didn't want him to have to do any extra work because of his legs.
And you can hear the grunts of exertion and or pain as he does it. Thwack! Thwack! And Ben Hines, the Dodger batting coach, goes back to check on Gibson and then walks back into the dugout. He walks past me and I hear him say to Lasorda, he thinks he can give it one good swing. Which is like, a line out of a bad B movie.
A more timid manager would have said, no, Kirk, sit down. I mean, I know you want to do it, but don't embarrass yourself. But he knew what type of player Kirk Gibson was. He'd go up there bleeding and try to help the team.
As long as he could walk up to that plate, I was going to put him in. If you're in a foxhole and you're in the heat of the battle, Kirk Gibson is the guy you want in there with you.
All of a sudden, I see a guy kind of like just brush past me and go up the steps, and I was taken back, and all of a sudden, I remember seeing number 23. I go, what? I said, Where's he going? He puts a helmet on and goes on deck.
I just told myself, when I walk out of that dugout, 50,000 fans are going to go nuts, and I won't hurt.
I just heard the crowd get really loud, and it was like, I like to hit and go, and it's like, oh no, we got a long time here for some limping act to get up here.
Here comes Gibson hobbling. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, Eckersley has dominated right-handers and left-handers the whole year, and this guy's hobbling. Looks like he can't even stand up there.
If you want to be melodramatic about it, you think what's going to happen is that Dennis Eckersley is going to throw it by him 3 times, and Gibson will limp back to the dugout, and Lasorda will say, well, it was worth a shot.
I was 0-2, and then I used to have a stance I called my emergency stance. Everybody knew about it. I just spread out, and, you know, I wasn't going down. Now, you weren't going to strike me out.
As that at-bat unfolded, and he dribbled one foul and took a couple of weak swings, you said to yourself, the only chance they have is if somehow he gets a piece of one and bloops it over the infield, especially after Davis stole second base.
Mike Davis stole the base, and I'm thinking, all they got to do is just serve a ball over the shortstop's head, and Davis scores, tie game, and we're in the ball game.
The way Kirk Gibson was swinging when he fouled those pitches off, I was hoping for a base hit and hope they didn't throw him out at first base.
Gibson shaking his left leg, making it quiver like a horse, trying to get rid of a troublesome fly.
I really think that Eck eventually outthought himself here. He began to think, I'm throwing fastball, fastball, fastball. He just expects me to challenge him and put him away.
I guess it just got a matter of, let's try something else. You know, this guy's just flicking this stuff.
If I can just sneak one breaking ball by him, the guy's rusty, he doesn't have his balance at the plate. How's he going to hit it? And yet what he wound up doing was throwing the only pitch that Kirk Gibson can hit.
But the game right now is at the plate.
Instead of another fastball, his best pitch, he threw a slider, and Gibson was ready for it, and he hit a gapper.
I got it. It's a fly ball to me. Then all of a sudden, I stop, and I realize that it's going over my head.
I knew it was coming, and then took 2 steps to right center, and then my 3rd step was to the dugout, because I knew it was gone.
She is gone!
Everybody's jumping and looking at each other like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. And when we got to home plate, it was crazy. And Kurt's like, you know, hey, I'm hurting, guys. Don't be jumping on my back here.
I jumped up. I hit my head on the cement dugout of Dodger Stadium there because we're just going nuts. Jumping up and down, coming down the third base line.
Well, everybody was going crazy, and in my head it was quiet. It was like quiet. I mean, it took a long time for it to set in. And walking off the field, people were going crazy. And looking in the dugout at my teammates, it was like slow motion.
And then he went down much later, and someone had already, I think one of his teammates or something, had already put over Gibson's locker, Roy Hobbs, which was perfect.
We really scouted the A's extremely well. I had our scouts, Mel Didier, Steve Boros, Jerry Stevenson, and Phil Regan.
Mel Didier went through all this litany of Eckersley, and then he mentioned you left-handed hitters, Socia, Gibson, Shelby, Davis. You can bet your bottom dollar that when he has a 3-2 count on, he's going to try and backdoor the slider.
He stepped in the box with 3-2, and he called time, and he stepped back, and there was a smile on his face, and he said, Mel, I could hear you. Partner, you better watch, because it's going to be a backdoor slider 3-2 with the winning run on second or third.
Which was a great scouting report. There's only one problem. Elias looked it up. Eckersley was never 3-2 on a left-handed hitter that year. So the scouting report was a bogus scouting report, but it turned out to be right.
Some Los Angeles fans like to beat the crowd in every sport. And if you watch the replay of that home run, and as the ball is disappearing over the right field fence, you can see the lights of the cars in the parking lot. The people who had left even a World Series game, a one-run World Series game early, they're pulling out. They're listening to the radio.
I was at the game as a fan, and this is very difficult to admit, particularly on national television. I left the game early. A friend of mine had to make it to the airport. Eckersley had come in, and we figured, you know something? We better get out of here, because it can be a nightmare sometimes getting out of Chavez Ravine onto the highways. So we're flipping it on the thing, and we went to the end of the dial, and you could get Channel 4, KNBC, and Vin Scully was breathless by the time we picked him up and recapping what had just gone on, and we both looked at each other. What idiots. We've just left history.
Ignited by Kirk Gibson's heroically defiant home run in Game 1, the Dodgers rode that momentum and the Bulldog pitching of Orel Hershiser, who won Game 2 and the clinching Game 5 and was voted Series MVP.
I think we're just outplayed at that point in time. I'm sure if we played the Dodgers 20-game series, we'd win 15 out of them. But at that point in time, they just had everything going for themselves. They had momentum. Every little thing they did it perfectly.
It's not always the strongest man who wins the fight, or the fastest man who will win a race, or the best team who will win a game. In most cases, it's the one who wants it more than the other. This guy never went to bat again in the World Series. That was his only appearance in the World Series. And by golly, he just shocked the world with that home run. And you know something? It paralyzed that other team so bad that they weren't able to recover. We beat them in 5 games.
That Dodger team might be the worst world champions that I've seen in 30 years of covering the World Series. And yet, they really deserve to win.
The A's kept returning to the World Series, appearing in 3 straight, but won only once over the Giants in the 1989 earthquake epic. After being swept by the Reds in 1990, the A's didn't seem quite the dynasty that had been expected.
Everybody thought that they were going to win this thing and that they had a lot of years in front of them, and that we were going to see the Oakland A's dominating baseball again.
They didn't get the full measure of acclaim that they deserved because they stubbed their toe in 2 World Series out of 3. They should have won all 3. But I think if they'd won all 3, people would have understood how good they really were.
One flick of the bat by a man who could barely stand, let alone walk, was the pivot on which the 1988 World Series swung. In his one and only at-bat of the World Series, Kirk Gibson made good on his spring training promise to the other Dodgers. I'll be the best teammate you ever had.
All the way back to the day that I stood in front of that team and had that team meeting and challenged them to give their heart and soul to become world champions. That's why I went up there. I remembered those words, and that was my duty to go up there.
This man played with every ounce of energy and determination every second he was out there. And it ended up costing him some games in future years because I think he had 12 cortisone shots that year.
And they say, well, he's not a Hall of Famer. I said, I won't disagree with you. But I'll tell you this, every baseball player that ever played this game wished they wanted to win as much as he did.
Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! A home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw.
The great thing about Jack's call is it's a combination of the perfect professionalism and the great voice of a Hall of Fame announcer, but also the surprise and enthusiasm of a fan.
I was working with Bill White, and that's when I said, I don't believe what I just saw, because I still couldn't believe it. It was one of the most dramatic hits in the history of baseball.
As you watch that swing today, almost flat-footed, almost one-handed, just a flick of the bat, it just doesn't look like a ball can go that far on a swing like that with someone as compromised as Gibson was. Man.
Forget about how much they make, forget about strikes, forget about holdouts. That was baseball.
Hollywood would have said, no, this script will never work. For everything to be on the line and 3-2 pitch, the
best reliever in the game against the MVP, and God, it's a phony script.
It's the natural in real life. It's better than the natural. You know, Redford wouldn't have dared make that movie that corny. You know, to have this guy limping around the bases at Dodger Stadium, you know, pumping his fist, having done what no one thought could be done.
I can still see it disappearing into the crowd. And I can still see Canseco out there, never looks. And I can still see Eck just throwing that head up there in the sky. And it seems to me like Gibson's trot has never ended.
On the day of the game, in his living room, Gibson tried to jog in place, try to swing a bat, hoping there might be a way he could play, all the while muffling howls of pain. Yet somehow evoking memories of the mythical Roy Hobbs, Gibson dragged himself to the plate. It would be his only at-bat of the series. It would turn out to be more than enough. For ESPN Classic's Battle Lines, I'm Rich Eisen.